A very good day, everybody who is on the line. My name is Vladimir Verbach. I'm Senior Managing Director of Sberbank, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Today we are having a non-standard exposure, unconventional one. We'll have a lot of prominent people talking about whether the AI might have any rights. Today it is still quite a long way till we arrive at a powerful AI that would have its own identity and independent behavior and would be equal to humans, but still forestalling would like to have a theoretical debate about whether it is possible to render such rights to the AI. And today, on the panel, we have some of the prominent representatives. Vice President for Development Planning of Skolko Foundation, Sergei Israelit, Director for S&T of the AI agency, Mr. Dushkin, Managing Partner of the St. Pete Office of Danton's, Head of Russian Practice in IT Telecom, Mr. Naumov, Deputy Head of the think tank under the government of the Russian Federation, Mr. Sergei Nakvasin, Director for the AI development of Yandex, Mr. Krainov, Head of the Center for Global Studies and International Relations from the Diplomatic Academy of the Russian Federation, Mr. Kozulin Vladimir, and Managing Director, Head of Sber AI Regulation as a visiting expert. Now, all of them will talk about theoretical arguments and pros in favor of attaining and rendering the legal identity. They will speak first in favor of giving the legal standing or identity, and then a pro will be followed by a con, and then another pro and another con, and each of the participants will have 4 minutes per intervention, and afterwards we'll have a set of quick-fire questions between the teams, and we will have a polling exercise. And 2 important comments. Most importantly, when we speak about the distant future, theories, well, the legal standing is not brought up at the national or governmental level right now. So each of the participants of the discussion will speak from himself and on his own behalf, because companies don't have stances on that at this point. So one of the key acts of the regulation governing the AI is the concept of AI and robotics till 2024, the Russian Federation. And that document spells out that the problems in regulation are because of the autonomous nature of the activity of AI and the inability to perceive the ethical norms, which is number 2. So first, Sergei Israelit, you were one of the co-authors of the concept. So whether you think we will be able to overcome the barrier of the artificial intelligence about being right or wrong. Good day. So actually we don't have any choice, as I think, because when we discuss the legal identity or standing, and philosophers have different visions on that, but the identity means being able to act independently from other identity bearers, and we may even question whether this or that individual has an identity or not, or is under effect. So the AI today is guided by the instructions from the developers or the external environment impact. We may acknowledge that they know nothing about our rules and norms of conduct. So the AI is capable of having conduct, but not knowledgeable of the rules of conduct. So they talk about an identity should be based not on the premise whether the AI system may behave as a human, but rather on how it is perceived by the broader public and what they fear. So the fears are mostly because they feel the conduct of the automated systems, but they don't feel the legal identity behind, because they think that a soulless info system talks to them. So for a system to develop a soul, we need to work hard to attain it some human touch. And if an intellectual system optimizes some function or some metrics, including maximizing the profits or the movement around the city, the pace of movement around the city, or selecting hotels, it means that the system processes a huge set of data. Part of that is related to people's interests, to take those interests into account, to be aware where this system, what is this system's place in the chain. The intellectual, intelligent systems will need some foundation. The more options they have, the more unpredictable they may turn, even for the dumb systems. It is true, the current dumb systems. So recognizing the identity of AI systems is like providing the information to the AI systems, what the society expects from them, what should be the underlying logic of their conduct and what may follow. Currently, there is no such language. The natural language is too difficult for the intelligent systems, and while the machine-readable law or language are still a far way to go, and it will take a lot to make our laws and rules transparent for the systems. It's not only about the developers, but the shareholders, the boards of directors should also be guided by these same tenets, because they should not be the profit seekers, the profiteers. They should be knowledgeable and mindful of other issues also. When we start about the ethics of AI, but that mostly encompasses people, but it's high time we discussed. Yeah, please, 30 seconds for you to go. So it is high time we discussed how autonomous systems will perceive those rules. Thank you. Thank you. As you mentioned, the ethics code in AI, I must say that here we have Sergei Nakvasin participating, who contributed a lot to the ethics code in AI, and that code has a provision saying that the human is responsible. So, Sergei, you are against rendering the legal identity to the AI, as I gather. What is your rationale? Hello, colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the chance to make my first steps analyzing the legal identity, which is a very difficult topic, the legal identity of AI. So I will start with basics, probably, and I will help those who will follow me, will speak after me and say that they're against the legal identity. So I'll remind you that Stephen Hawking said that the AI capable of thinking and decision-making autonomously may become a cause for the death of the human civilization. Currently, the AI is not endowed with will, as a mental process. Why is it important while discussing the legal identity in line with the legal regulations like the civil code? The actors act upon their will and are guided by their interests. The incongruity between the conduct, the will, and the interests are a breach of the civil law. It is enshrined in the legislation that a transaction that was committed under, well, in misguidance or under coercion may be rendered null and void. So the will has a lot of legal power and significance and is part and parcel of the legal identity for a natural person. And the persons are also rendered responsible for their breaches, while the AI is an algorithm without its free will that was designed by humans to exercise some functions, objective functions. So the goals taken into consideration should be those who use the AI in their interests. So the legal identity issue is not the response is not trying to emulate the human intellect. No, it is a matter of responsibility for one's own choice, and the persons, the human being, can be responsible with its own property, time, or even life, and the AI cannot do so, is not capable of that. So we should not pin the blame on the technology instead of bringing people, individuals, persons to account. So the AI is definitely a product of the human mind, because there is always a designer or an entity behind. This is why the Code of Ethics in AI that was approved last month states and spells out clearly that people are behind the AI and they are the final responsible actor in charge of the AI. So I would be against handing the legal identity over to the AI. Thank you, Sergei. So you raised the degree of our discussions today. Now let me give the floor to Roman Dushkin. In your book dedicated to a powerful AI, you state and you argue whether the AI may be rendered as a technical person. Can you speak of that, and can you speak about legal identity in your vision, your perspective? Thank you, Andrei, for the invitation to speak at this platform. I've listened to Sergei, and for each of these points, I know I developed a counterpoint that dawned on me like a revelation. If the AI systems may have a developer, so a human being may have parents or teachers and tutors, so shifting the blame on the people, on individuals, and trying to, like, would be kind of trying to remove responsibility from one's parents that brought an individual up. But now we're discussing a very distant future. I think what Sergei has said is mostly about the narrow AI systems, and the code definitely is about these systems. That it took us a lot to elaborate that and sign that, but now we are speaking about potential new systems that may emerge in 10 to 20 years, or they may emerge tomorrow, that will be fully cognate and conscious, and they will have their own free will and motivation and emotional structure that we perceive in each other, and we are aware that the motivation ladder like the lower and the higher motivations, allows us to speak that we act deliberately in conformity with our free will and with our interests. Why these technical systems cannot emerge in future? All of that is easy to algorithm, and we cannot see any fundamental obstacles to that, and we are seeing now actors that don't face any obstacles as well. So my personal standing on that is that the evolution of the AI systems towards a powerful, self-conscious, technical person, we'll see how it's called in future, will happen via the human augmentation. So the humans will fuse with their product in an android organism, by cyber organism. And here, like attaining the legal identity to the AI will not be brought up, because, you know, when the individuals will fuse with their engendered entities, they would kind of still have their motives and their free will, so they will be in charge still. And this augmented human being will still have that. We will be transformed and we will be evolutionizing, including us, those participating in this discussion. So in future, when the time is ripe and when these systems of powerful AI emerge, the question about their legal identity will be resolved in their favor. Thank you, Roman. You have expressed a very interesting and curious idea that the AI systems will not exist on a standalone basis, but there will be a fusion between them and human beings, and they will not act separately, I mean the AI systems. And I would also like to raise the degree of our debate further, and let's speak about the dilemma of the rail car. If the rail car goes directly, goes forward, it will kill 5 people, but if you transfer it to a new track, it will kill 1 person only. So how shall we act in this case? This moral dilemma can be applied to drones. So I'd like to ask Alexander Krainov how the AI would act if it had access to this arrow. I have heard a version, I'm not sure whether it is true or not, that this is a typical situation, and it is described in the instructions guidelines for aero officers, and it should be in semi-position. And in this situation, the rail car, the open rail car, would move off the track, and no one will be killed. In this case, a drone would also act likewise. In its target, in its objective function, it doesn't have a choice, such a choice that it will minimize the collision, the impact. If in both cases the probability of a collision would be near to 100%, the drone would opt for the safer option and mode of conduct. Well, if I may add something to the topic of today's debate, I want to say that we probably oughtn't to attain the identity to the AI, whether it's strong or weak. The AI currently has a function, an objective function, and it's quite efficient. quite successful. I doubt that within our lifespan the AI will, seize the world or become a full-fledged identity. I can't fancy why that may become necessary, but let's admit that, let's assume that it might happen in a parallel reality or in our reality, and we have the advent of a powerful AI. Well, let's take a dog that is a better sniffer than us, and it is superior to us in some of the things and skills. So it is a powerful AI, and it keeps living. So it's several orders stronger than what we can come up with. But a dog or the dog wouldn't have any legal identity. So I'm fully supportive of Sergei Nakvasin. Like, we have people that design the AI and are the goal setters, and that goal comprises all the possible benefits or errors of the AI. And this goal setting determines whether the an AI system would be damaging or useful, a boon or a bane. So humans hold the rights. So it's not about the AI per se. Thank you very much. And now I would give the floor to Viktor Naumov. You were one of the co-authors of the concept and the first draft law on robotics, and you threw off a draft law on robots. And first, you related robots either to animals or to property items, but I think that dog is a weak AI, not a strong AI. But now the robo-agents, another category, has been added. Can you express your stance on that? What do you think on the legal identity? Hello, dear colleagues, friends, and comrades in arms and on discussions. Thank you very much, Sberbank, for the organizing.
This discussion is very exciting, very representative panel, very interesting speakers. We are in a common situation. We should we should select where to go in a difficult situation. I have to note that all considerations and the reflections in this regard should fit in the approximation system. One of the approximation is that we are in a situation when we argue on what we do not have. We cannot touch, cannot see, we cannot take the strong AI by the hand. There is a bunch of approaches, and these approaches will appear for a horizon for a certain period of time. Another important reflection, we all should be human-centric. The value of the human, of his ideals, values, and freedoms, and the requirements for the development of human society should be the key. I'm not a transhumanist. I do not believe that the considerations that it doesn't matter who after 100,000 years be still living on our planet, robots or humans. Probably there will be a next stage of the development of our civilization. I perceive it all as a very harmful discussions which can exist, but objectively there should not be any system of values be built around in this area. Next important consideration, we should bear in mind that all assumptions in this regard should be built around specific economic interests of those stakeholders and players of the process which are being developed strongly, starting from producers to investors, from the society to the government. And now, amid a very uncertain future and economics, we should bear in mind that all solutions should be influenced and are influenced by these economic interests. So we have to correct and adjust our perceptions, discussions, and everything else with regard to this important aspect, important component. Since we have to understand that someone is just benefit from these solutions and they promote it due to some profit considerations. Others have some political motives for that. So my personal position is that introduction of very limited legal standing for future complex technical systems is possible based on two grounds. First is that for the moment the right as a theoretical and practical instrumental environment as a social regulator will be breaking, will be slowing down for some period when it comes to the issues of legal standings and use of indicated systems. The paradigm is the following, that we have now this will and aftermath, where we have complicated systems. Yes, the person can turn on the system, the developer pushes the red button, but it doesn't know how the system would act, and we cannot pile blame on him the category of convention, which can be a basis for the criminal prosecution. It's not possible. So to build up the chain and adding the link of the relevance, these principles and cause and effective is very important in the issues of legal standing. On top of that, coming back to those economic interests, on my point of view, general danger for the human development is not the consideration whether we'll give rights to robots or not, but in general the issue whether those systems are dangerous or not, whether they're dangerous with the fact that many people from the positive progress on view is good, but many will extract profits from creation and selling of those systems. And to limit the level of objective danger of those systems, when in the consumer society everybody will strive for buying it and to make them living, we have to implement certain system of limitations. And summing up, I see at least three structures which would be of importance here to supplement the quasi-subjectivity area, to provide interests of the human and the society. First is a compulsory system identification. Every subject should know about this interaction, and I'm coming to the end. The second, qualified principle of qualification, the principle of qualification of the developer, owner, and the user. Unfortunately, we have to introduce the rights to create and use those systems, however detrimental it would be to the technical progress. And the final thing, which is absolutely not detected by the modern rule of law, we should guarantee the right of human to refuse from using AI systems, and this will give the full-fledged choice somehow in this part for the human beings. Do you understand correctly that the limiting legal standing should be introduced? Yes, yes. Now I'd like to give the floor to Vadim Kazyulin. Vadim, as far as I understand, you're going to speak against the legal standing, and previously you were actively advocating, you were really against use of combat robots. Can you explain your position? Yes, thank you, colleagues. And people and humanity is in a transitional period from today to the future. And Roman Dushkin, my colleague, described this future for us in a few words. Sergei Nakvasin described today when artificial intelligence doesn't have will and responsibility, but as technologies evolved, people also change. And here we need to draw our attention to the final discussion of our constitution version. The most support was given to the animal rights protection. Today in Europe, they discuss an opportunity to put ban on hunting. The humanity becomes more human and human to animals, and we can also think that artificial intelligence and other aggregators would get some support in this regard, and this idea was born not on an empty place. Nevertheless, so far artificial intelligence does not demonstrate any intelligence which could be equal to animals. Despite the Turing tests, I think that the test participants were cheating a little bit, and everyone can trace the development of this intellect when you ask a question in the search engine what poet Pushkin wrote about Moscow metro. Artificial intelligence will collect a lot about metro, about Pushkin, but we will hardly have a good answer to this question. So today, I will speak about combat AI. This is my favorite topic, but I would like to remind you about the notion of the human dignity. Human dignity is an ephemeral notion. It's hard to characterize. We cannot touch and feel it, unfortunately, but nevertheless, it is precious for us since we're people, since we're humans, and since we're on the top of this pyramid, and we do not have anybody to compete with. So speaking about that future where a strong AI would appear, probably humanity would be willing to protect its rights and to protect it, protecting the human dignity. Human dignity today is a very important factor when we discuss combat or warfare AI. When we say we, it means UN, which has the Non-Human Weapon Convention, and within this convention, the discussions go about the use of the artificial intelligence. This convention already already restricted use of blinding lasers and the firing agents like napalm, and they put a question on banning the use of deadly autonomous systems, which is artificial intelligence in warfare. There's a group of states which is advocating the complete ban, and there is another group, and Russia is part of it, saying that AI would help humanity to abide by the international humanitarian law. What is international humanitarian law? It's a set of laws of a waging war, where human and civilians are on top, and it is very bad to kill them, and it's not allowed to kill them. Many technical specialists discuss whether artificial intelligence be able to observe this international humanitarian law, conditionally speaking, split civilians from militaries and medical persons from wounded, and split from those who are really able to wage the war. Who will weigh out the impact strength during attack? Is it possible or not? So there is a category of militaries who would say that artificial intelligence, after 10 seconds in military systems, would stop precisely accumulating and will add up error. This is a fatal thing. And summing up, I should say that AI doesn't have intuition, which can be part of the human brain. It's not possible for the AI. Sometimes cyber robots would appear, and this is a serious problem. Some countries already invest in it. Cyber organisms based on insects or animals, and this is a serious threat. That's what we should discuss today in terms of legal standing, and whether these creatures, and if it's even a human, whether those creatures will have separate rules, unlike we as humans. Vadim, so you are against legal standing due to the military potential, right? Including the military and combat use. Colleagues, thank you very much. Now we will have QR code on our screens. And if you put your smartphone on this QR code, you can open the questionnaire, and I'd like to ask you to give the answer. What position would be closer to you? To accept the rights of the artificial intelligence, or it is not possible and it will never happen? Yes, there are rights for AI, or no rights for AI. And in the end, we will draw the conclusions of our online questionnaire. Now let's move to the Blitz questionnaire question. It will work in the following kind. We have opponents and proponents. First, one colleague from proponents would ask a question to opponents, and then the question will be asked to opponents. Let's be limited for question and answer of 1 minute. So let's start from Sergei Israeli. Your question, please, Sergei. I would ask a question to Alexander Krainov first. Alexander, what do you think? Why the community put a question of ethical behavior of AI? Thanks for this wonderful question. It's very comfortable for me to answer. I think that the whole knowledge of the society, of 99% of the knowledge about artificial intelligence, how it behaves and what it is going to do, it is based on serious programs like Matrix movie or Terminator movies. And people imagine it like this: something is like an android or imitating completely the human, would behave as a human, think as a human, but at the same time is an antagonist and has different goals, own goals, political ones or survival goals, whatever. And for that reason, there we have this perception. What can I add from myself? What is absolutely different from what AI is in real life? Thank you, Alexander. Your question now. Let me ask my question, yes. For example, to Roman Dushkin. Roman, when shall we expect, what is your forecast, when a strong AI would appear? The future forecasting is a very bad thing, and to say that in 5 years from now it will appear, or in 10 years it will appear, it is very difficult, you know. It's better to give a longer horizon, and when it comes a little bit earlier, would say, yes, I told you that it will appear, right? So, and become a PIFIA in this, I'm not going to be, I do not give and do not set these fundamental barriers for emerging strong artificial intelligence. I do not see it. Probably we are all strong AIs living in a virtual reality, and we are sitting now here communicating with each other on this important issue, whether we should give some rights to the lower level AIs. Well, that's it. There are no fundamental barriers. It should come at one point, but when it will come, it's hard to say. It will depend on the acceleration of the technical progress on our planet, which I cannot influence. Sorry to intervene, Roman. Please do not disclose the secret that we are the strongest AI here. Yes, sorry for that. My blame. The secret was revealed. Roman, your question, please, now. Yes, Vladimir. If possible, I'd like to ask all the participants from the against team, because there will be very short answer, yes or no. Very simple question. Let's imagine a child, a girl, 10 years old, and she behaves like a normal girl, child. She's playing on the playground, watching cartoons, and so on. Answer, yes or no. Are you ready to turn her off and erase her personality only because she has no flesh and blood inside, but opinions and some AI chips? I'm not ready due to the reason that I wouldn't erase my operating system from my smartphone. We won't be able to sell it afterwards, right? Colleagues, other answers, please. From humanitarian perception, I would feel sorry about the girl, but this is the humanism, this is the human dignity which we transfer to animals. It's not a girl, it's the SM0315 model. It's not a girl. Of course not. I just saw in this situation what it's not possible to exist. It's a miracle, which is absolutely incredible. This is the AI existence of which I do not believe in. If I face it, of course I'm not going to switch it off. Okay, thank you. Then the question was to all. Then Sergei Nakvasin, could you just pick up the relay? Yes, sure. Let's continue this practice of yes or no questions, yes or no answers. First, some background information, very briefly. I believe that to observe rights of others, it's a moral or internal requirement or feeling of higher morality of the human being, or some concerns about the inevitable punishment if he or she wouldn't do so. At the same time, the availability of responsibility makes him or her observe rights of others. A question to you colleagues from the proponents group. Do you think that the risk of emergence of strong AI of a convict or a criminal is very high? It's a question to Viktor Naumov, I believe, directly. Thanks, colleagues. With the recidivists, criminals, the thieves, they have an ability to sell what they get, their booty. And the developers, the cryptocurrency or the hackers will have a lot of benefits from the fact that this system will give some profit, and that's possible. I would support. There are chances for the criminals. They're unexpectedly high. That could be massively spread, and illegal use of AI will be first if there will be strong technologies. Okay, the first will be the criminal cases. It's described in Mark Tergner's book, Live 3.0. A mega group was dealing with this. Can we afford ourselves to give those who are potentially dangerous and illegal, can we give them legal standing? Obviously not. I think it is vice versa. It works in the other way. That was my message. Please pay attention. If we don't do this, we will not involve in the dialogue about our values the system which would have this opportunity by its evolution. And in course of the evolution of the system would from the very beginning learn how to observe our laws, we will get a more correct system, more personality, whatever, which will be more legal, other than we didn't do it. If you allow a few words from my side, how this question would look like in the military sphere, which is now considered in UN. In all codes which are proposed, it is written that the responsibility for the actions of the AI equipment is on humans. This is the basic principle, fundamental principle, and no one proposes to transfer this responsibility to the AI equipment, whatever intellectual it would be. Okay, Vadim, your question, please. Question to Roman Dushkin. His speech was so brilliant. He showed his high ability to answer questions. You are saying that human has foster parents or parents and teachers. The AI, they have also parents. This is the developer. And even Stalin said that the child is not responsible for the father, and the father is not responsible for the son. Do you believe that the developer will not be responsible for AI, for his child? Thanks, Vadim, for a very important question. Already today, AI systems, which are based on machine learning technologies, they can independently collect those hidden regularities they find in the data arrays they get for learning. And the developer of those systems will just putting one neuron to others and just connected the network topology and connected layers in between in those layers. And then he fed the data to the system for system to learn. And he has nothing to do with this system. He doesn't know what's inside. Of course, from the regulation point of view, we are dealing with the studying issues, what data should be provided for machine learning and AI learning. But if we consider this question in a universal and wide point of view, the data could be different, and what system would learn from that system be possible to know only for the system itself. And without the explanatory model, the system will not be able to explain why different regularities in this data were found and were used for decision making. And so the developer, as the parent, can be responsible only for the architecture and the network topology. If we speak about the system which is based on the machine learning and neural network approach. And the foster role, the teacher role, should be played by the data marker, those people who collected data and marked it and provided this data for learning. And a return question, is the foster or the teacher be responsible what happened out of his or her pupil? Well, I think today it is based on the judicial consideration and proceedings, and in this trolley case, the court will decide who will be responsible. Of course, not the trolley will be to blame. Of course, the switchman will be responsible, or those who designed the bad quality wheels. Okay, the switchman is to blame, the scapegoat. Okay, Victor has the question. Victor, please. Thank you, Vladimir, colleagues. We are discussing indeed what has been discussed, maybe not so actively, what have been there, already been there, 400 years or 800 years ago, or even longer ago. Let's think about legal entities. A legal entity you cannot embrace, you cannot shake hands with, but nevertheless, this is a very important subject to take the theory of law when it appeared, and now it's just the entity of relations which allow to describe and to realize complicated relations. And if we do not introduce these subjects in this novel reality, then we should ask, when someone pushes the red button and the robot, due to the complexity of the processes, starts to act without control, who will be directly responsible? For example, criminal responsibility for harm which was inflicted to the health and safety or life of people. When pushing the button, the developer didn't have the bad intention to kill, to harm an entity or an individual. What do you think? Who will be drafted for the responsibility when neither the developer nor the owner didn't want to kill anybody or harm anybody? Okay, we are moving to the criminal domain now. Who's going to answer? There was a tragedy recently in the club Sivnya Vishnya, the trade mall was on fire, and the owner was convicted, the developer of the fire system were convicted, two employees of the fire crew, the guard who closed the doors, and Rostekhnadzor agency, and heads of different organizations who had to do with the activities, they got real jail sentences. Well, why technological systems which are modestly called artificial intelligence, they provide a decision-making process. Why those technological systems or developers and vendors and operators of those systems will exempt from the liability as the workers in the fire alarm systems? Can I have a precision, a specifying question? Do I understand correctly? In your example about the criminal, someone would make a mistake, and technical systems make a mistake, and would put out the gin from the bottle, and this thief will repeatedly go and burglar people, and you will be seeking for switchmen who didn't analyze data sets, didn't take it into account, didn't take into account data, which would prevent from this algorithm to make errors. This is the question for shareholders who were put in place instead of the technical executors to optimize it. Why are you surprised by that? Let's take aviation. And the disaster, a plane crash happens. What happens afterwards? Two events. First, the criminal case is instigated about the bad quality of plane services, and the people to blame will be taken. And the second thing, the black boxes should be analyzed to analyze the system of the operation of systems and find the error. And before that, the flights are suspended of this airline or this model of planes are not flying until everything is clarified. We are out of time almost. I'd like to give the floor to Andrei Neznamov for his comments and then go over to the final remarks. It's a really pity that the time we have given for this debate is not 1 or 2 hours, because colleagues, everything what has been said and the level of speakers in your presentations is very, very high and very exciting. And I wanted to have a side look on these rights of AI. It's ideal time. We will spread this record, and if they ask me about the question about the rights for AI, I would refer to this dialogue. Who won in this discussion or who lost, I don't know. You all, on our request, deliberately exacerbated your positions and pointed out your positions. The global society continues this discussion, although we have had a wave of very wide interest in 2017, 2018, 19. And at some point, this wave of interest faded. It resumed when the global recommendations on ethics were developed, and a number of states started to develop these recommendations and design it.
It's not by chance that I have mentioned the UN instrument, because this first global ever AI instrument scheduled for next week, and it has no mention of the legal identity for the AI. It doesn't mean that this idea has been abandoned on the global level, and I'm sure that while mass media and filmmakers supply us with different movies and sci-fi, will have a lot of topics to discuss in different contexts and makeups, and for many of us the advent of new technology makes this question even more relevant. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. Let's look at the poll results. Can you share the results? So this is how it looks. Virtually, it is neck and neck in favor and against the legal entity, the legal rights. But still, The non-believers in the legal identity for the AI have a narrow lead, but that may be within the margin of error. Thank you for the results. And we have just 15 to 30 seconds left for the concluding remarks. Anyone wishing to speak up? Sergey, welcome. I think that at the core of our discussion, we have the question whether the AI has something to respond. And I am in agreement with Viktor Naumov. There's a legal entity would definitely is answerable with authorized capital and goodwill and other things. And likewise, the advanced super AI may have the reputation, the goodwill, the brand value, or the cryptocurrency that will ensure safeguarding the consumers against the possible risks. Anyone else? Vadim, over to you. There is a deep Chinese saying, if you can replicate a master's work, you are a master yourself. That speaks of your prowess. And today the AI is capable of repeating, replicating, emulating the master's work. But today still it lacks intuition, it's only an emulator. It is not a master, but a cyborg, an insect or an animal or a human will have intuition like a wolf might have. I'm not speaking about a cyborg, an android with a human brain. In this case, it will have the will and the responsibility and the legal identity. Some of the military in the world invest money in that. I will definitely object against the intuition and the AI. Many thought so, trying to say that the computer would never defeat a human being in Goa, but the intuition is still present. So there is a hypothesis, which I rather share than not. It's quite convincing, saying that an individual may not have consciousness, but rather the society has consciousness, collective consciousness. And, we are herd animals, and being in a bundle, in a group, we may develop consciousness. And the AI works in silo with an input data and output data, and even our approaches cannot resolve that. What quantum leap may follow, and what happens when the AI models learn to interact with each other, and thus it is a curious question, but I cannot fancy what may come out of that. Probably it will communicate in metaverse. Anyone else wishing? Just a minute. Roman. In a nutshell, I'll support Vadim with the Chinese wisdom of his. Well, who wants to become a master, an artisan? But let's look at from the other perspective. From another perspective, we're trying to replicate the work of an artisan or a master, replicating a human-like intelligence on a new technical base. So what we want is to make it a master. Victor, 30 seconds, and off we go. Thank you. In the context when we fear the AI, which is legitimately introducing a limited legal identity, would be an instrument to protect ourselves not only from the AI, but from protecting ourselves from ourselves. And that will be conducive to defining the responsibilities and roles. Thank you, colleagues. We have had a lively debate. I want to thank all of you who have talked the legal identity for the AI. We have a 50 to 50 split of opinions with respect to pros and cons. We'll come back to this topic on many occasions in future. Thank you. Thank you.